All right, Hoyne, let's get into your overall observation of round 9.
Yeah, so off the back of what we saw Thursday night with the performance of Christian Petracca and probably the conversation that we've had around Christian Petracca for the last couple of years, how often do you use him inside forward 50? How often should you use him, in the midfield? If you, if you just take him as that example, and it just got me thinking, about a few other players at other clubs. If you just take a listen to a few of these names. So if we just start with Petracca, so the impact over the last 3 years that he's had as a forward, only Taylor Walker has had greater impact as a forward than what Christian Petracca has over the last 3 years. His impact as a midfielder is still top 10 in the competition. So you can understand the dilemma that Melbourne are having. How much of an impact does he have away from that midfield group compared to what he does inside forward 50? So that's going to be a constant battle. We move to the Dogs, and a little bit of credit here to Luke Beveridge and how they've actually used Jack Macrae. And it was a little bit of a surprise to a few of us in terms of seeing that role change this year to be a 60% forward and a 40% midfielder. But if we take a look over the last 3 years, when he's played as a forward, he's had the fourth most impact of any forward in the competition. So Petracca, Walker, Curnow and Jack Macrae.
So do you judge that by essentially scoreboard impact? So goals, behinds, score assists, score involvements. Are they about the 4 that you use to judge that?
Yeah, so it's all off the player ratings and how much impact you're having with ball in hand, how you're winning it and how you're using it. So, what he's actually doing when he's starting as a front six, player. And it sort of takes you back a little bit, or sort of a long way, if you like, to to the role that he was playing in the 2016 Premiership season. He was playing that high half forward, sort of 50-50 midfield forward split, and the ability to be able to impact the scoreboard through his score involvements was through the roof. So it's a little bit of a take back to to 8 years ago for Jack Macrae. So hats off there. The Jordan Dawson one, I'm interested in your thoughts here, Kane. So again, using this 3-year period, when he's played as a midfielder, the impact that he's had on matches has been to expectation for a midfielder. So he's going fine, but he's not shooting the lights out. When he's played either behind the ball or ahead of the ball, the impact that he's having on matches is through the roof. So I was a little bit, I'll put my hand up, I was a little bit surprised to see him, actually play more forward than back over the last 5 or 6 weeks, but the impact that he's having in that mid-forward role, playing that 70%, 30% mid-forward time, has actually seen Adelaide probably offensively change compared to what they were the first 3 or 4 weeks of the year. So hats off there. Do they actually sort of stick to this 70%, 30% midfield forward split, or do they actually invest in a little bit more forward time for Dawson?
I want to ask you about Adelaide, and he plays a crucial role in that. I think his score involvements late in that Brisbane game, and he's done it before, were really impactful and led to scores. Are they the best transition team, like on scoring from their back half? Probably in the last. I mean, the Port Adelaide game sticks out, and that against Brisbane, their efficiency going inside forward 50 sticks out as well. So perhaps it's just, in my mind, recently, in this, geez, they move the ball quickly with speed, and they go into an open forward line. Their half forwards come up and sprint back and get in behind. Are they one of the better teams at doing that in recent times?
The scoreboard return has been strong, and I'll get into them as the show goes on as well, but their overall ball movement numbers aren't, perhaps as strong as what, the eye sort of alludes to, we'll get into them shortly. But, Jack Crisp, so at the start of the year, really out of form. We put him on watch on this show, for a couple of weeks. Really surprising given, how he's performed for a number of years. They started to use him a little bit down back, at the start of the year, didn't really have that impact. And over the last 3 years as a defender, his performance has been okay without being through the roof. But where he has his most damage is when he plays as that mid-forward, real damaging centre, sort of centre forward, all towards goal type of player. And since he's gone back in there, I don't think it's really any sort of surprise that this midfield group, along with what Dacos has been able to do over the last couple of weeks, has really improved and taken their game to another level. So I'll be surprised whether or not we see him move back anytime soon. I think, the role that Collingwood have him, sort of playing at the moment is to his strengths and maximising that magnet. And then there's a couple that I just want to put on the agenda and just get your thoughts as well, that we haven't sort of really seen these role changes, but I'm interested to see whether or not we can. So I'm a strong believer in what Geelong are producing this year. I know you are as well. But if there is one area of concern, and potentially at the moment as well, obviously with no Dangerfield in there, is what they're sort of throwing at you with the midfield mix. Over the last couple of seasons, in terms of impact as a midfielder, Geelong's number one impact midfielder is Max Holmes. So the role that he's sort of playing across halfback this year has been a tick, and that's sort of the game that they're wanting to play. They're wanting to play a quick ball movement game which suits him. I just wonder if the game, like it was on Friday night, where it's clearly the midfield issue to start the game was a massive concern, whether or not they can throw this magnet in a little bit quicker to potentially arrest what's actually happening in there and throw something different at them. I think, with all due respect, with this midfield group at the moment, they are workmanlike, and they've been exceptional in terms of really trying to limit and pressure the opposition. But to throw something offensively at a midfield group, he's the one for me. Noah Anderson.
I wonder, just on Holmes, I wonder if, and this may sound harsh, I wonder if he's tough enough. I wonder if inside they have full faith in him in a big game to trust his toughness. Because I still, and I don't, you don't really question any AFL footballer who crosses that white line in terms of their courage, but I see too often a fumble at a crucial time. Now, I don't know if that's just ball handling. My suspicion is he's bracing for contact. There was a nasty one against Hoyne Francis on the weekend, and it's not every time he goes for the football that there's occasionally you see one, you go, oh, didn't like that from Max. So I don't know. I'm just speculating whether Chris Scott has full faith in him to go in against a midfield of Wines, Drew, Butters and Hoyne Francis and have full faith that Max Holmes can go toe-to-toe, or whether he says, no, I'm going to put, Mullen or Atkins or the real terriers in their Blixarves up against this midfield group. That would be the question that, not that Chris Scott would admit to that, even if he did question Max Holmes, but I wonder if there's something in that there.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting discussion. I mean, yeah, his speed is his strength as opposed to his actual, ball-winning ability, I suppose. So that's an interesting, sort of question there. Noah Anderson for me. So, so this Gold Coast midfield off the back of largely what Matt Rowell is doing, and we've endorsed him on this show numerous times, but Noah Anderson, the impact that he's having as a midfielder this year is okay without being through the roof. His performance a couple of weeks ago, was the best of his season, but we haven't really seen that on a consistent basis. We've only seen him go forward, for a couple of 100 minutes over his career, but when he has gone forward, the performances and that he has put forward has been absolutely exceptional. So I just wonder whether or not, for something different, I mean, that's the next sort of evolution of the Gold Coast piece, I think, that Dimmer will be working on, is their offense. Whether or not this guy can be, a little bit more, and I'm not looking at these guys and going, you just need to completely change their position. I'm more looking at it for 5 minutes a quarter. Can you throw him forward 20 minutes a game, 5 minutes a quarter, just to see what he can do, as opposed to, sort of playing that 95, 96% midfield minutes. So just putting him there, and Newcomb as well. Jai Newcomb, for me, is another one. What he's doing in the midfield has been good, but what he's done, over the last couple of years when he's gone forward has been exceptional as well. So whether or not, we've talked last week around what they're doing from a ground ball perspective is absolutely, elite at the moment, and that was on show again against St Kilda. So they've got that area down pat. He's an important component to that area. Sam Mitchell's building for a couple of years' time. He's not building for 2024. So I just wonder, whether or not he looks at this magnet over the next, coming weeks or coming months and go, oh, I'm going to have a look at this guy a little bit more forward of centre. So I don't know what you think, Kane, but I just look at him with his body shape, inside forward 50. I reckon he would be, a difficult matchup one-on-one inside forward 50.
Yeah, and the penetration in his kick as well. So he's not Petrarca, but he's built similarly to Petrarca with that power and the one-on-one ability, which doesn't get utilised that often, but I've loved seeing him back in form in the last 3 weeks through the midfield as well. Off topic a little bit, and I know I was critical of it at the time with the excuse of Ross not being able to use the runner, but let's just assess that issue in isolation. Would it be beneficial for the game, do you think, to allow coaches more access to use the runner in game? So these discussions that you're having here about match committee decisions and changes in game, coaches have a bit more flexibility to make them? Or are you okay with runners only being able to use 4 times a quarter and after goals?
I'm probably different to a lot of people. I'm all for more runner access to actually allow the coaches to bring more tactical sort of battle into the actual game, as opposed to waiting for a 30-minute period to be able to make significant changes like these magnets. I'm always curious, and your brother will probably know a hell of a lot more than us, how much impact you can actually have from the box in a 30-minute period. By the time that message can actually get out to the players to be able to, get what you want, and then you want to get that across 23 individuals so they're all on the same page. I'm always a little bit curious. I can appreciate what you can do at the quarter breaks, but I think being able to give the runners a little bit more access, I'm all for it. The last individual, and I just want to ask you this question, Kane, around the pre-season conversation that we just had, and this guy's coming out of contract and he's going to be available. For 17 other clubs is Cam Zurhaar. So Cam Zurhaar's performance over the last couple of years, whether this is through fitness or not, or just through the magnets, but when he has played midfield minutes, he's performed well above expectation for a midfielder. We just haven't seen enough of it. When he's played as a forward over the last couple of years, his performance is well below expectation. So if I'm a club, I'm looking at this guy at the end of the year going, okay, he's out of contract, he's available. Whether or not he's gettable or not, I'm not too sure. But if I'm going after him, I'm only going after him if he's going to be able to play that 50 to 60 to 70% midfield minutes and change the profile like we've seen from a few other individuals like a De Goey and a Hoyne and a Petrarca early days. I'm not sure whether or not he's got the fitness to be able to actually do that or not. But that's probably the only reason I'm going after this guy, is if you think you can change him to be that player.
Yeah, look, and he may want that opportunity, but the facts are he hasn't prepared himself well enough to deserve those opportunities. Otherwise, they would have access to the stats just like you have, and they're not stupid. As much as they haven't won a lot of games of football in North Melbourne, they're probably going, well, we can put him in there for 5 minutes, but then we'll ruin him for the rest of the game if we leave him there. So we have to play him forward because he doesn't have the tank to be able to do it. Now, the club that he goes to can seek those assurances, but how can you guarantee that he's up for the fight? Because he'll sign a 6-year deal regardless. Some club, and I wouldn't be critical of a club for offering him 6 years because of the upside that you have, they can have that discussion with him in the offseason and go, yep, I'm up for it. But how can you guarantee that he'll put the work in? So whoever gets him, it's a risk because you're signing him up for 6 years regardless on guaranteed money, on big money. And as much as his words may say the right thing in the off-season, we won't know until you see it in a new environment and whether he's willing to put in the work and maximise the talent that he's got. Because at the moment, he's pretty underwhelming, isn't he? I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah.
Let's get into your 7 main talking points from the round. We'll start with the Red Hot Bombers. Is there any, all the hype, and we do this from week to week, but this has been more sustainable for them. It's been a period of 5 weeks now. We wanted to see them against the good side. We did, so tick that box. The next 2 weeks, you tick. What are you noticing with the Bombers?
Yeah, all we're doing is analysing performance that we see on field. That's all that we're doing. There's no biases attached to this. It's just purely just analysing performance. And yeah, I know a few people hit me up over the weekend. Are you finally going to give Essendon praise and what have you? Well, yeah, you are, because the performances have changed. So we talk about the core 4 that myself and Kingy reference religiously over the last couple of years. The last 5 weeks, they're 12th with the footy, they're 8th without the footy, 5th for clearances, and 10th for their post-clearance contest work. The one number, and I said this on this show a couple of weeks ago, the only time we're going to talk about Essendon again is when they're without the footy and their defensive profile changed. Otherwise, it was just a boring conversation. After the first 4 weeks of the year, they were again 16th in terms of what they were doing without the footy, after being 15th the year before and 16th the year before that. So we hadn't seen anything change. So to be 8th over the last 5 weeks, that's a significant improvement and something that deserves to be recognised. It's nothing. It's not top 4, top 3 in the competition at the moment where you're absolutely looking at going, this is absolutely bulletproof. But from where it's come from and the expectation of sort of what we've seen over the last couple of years, it's a significant improvement. And their ability to be able to to defend ball movement. We spoke about how poor it was in the first 3 or 4 games of this season. In 3 of the last 4 weeks, that's been exceptional. Collingwood got them, in terms of their ability to be able to move, to move the footy, but they're flying at the moment. Their ability to be able to defend GWS on the weekend, and most importantly, to defend what they did when GWS won the ball back off them, that was a huge tick and something that we hadn't seen before. So the first 4 weeks of the year, only North Melbourne were easier to punish a turnover against. Now they're top 7 over the last 5 weeks. So this profile deserves to be recognised. It deserves to be, sort of praised. It's still got a fair way to go in terms of, if it wants to be challenging, towards a prelim final weekend. But I don't think Essendon at the moment are there. They're in that, this profile's in this conversation now. Okay, now this is a finals-based team. We talked about it last year, at about round 15 or 16, they might have been 5th or 6th, and people are saying, you could trust Essendon, you can trust Essendon. Their defensive stuff was still poor. And it was just cool the Jets, because this is how they're actually performing defensively. Then, and then it all came undone, in the last 6 or 7 weeks of the year. This is something that we haven't seen from Essendon for quite a while, so they deserve to be recognised, in the positive.
There you go, Bombers fans. Bit of love for you. 0433 98 11 16 if you've got any further questions on that. What about the Swans?
Yeah, we bang on about the turnover game and how important the turnover game is. 17 of the last 18 premiers have been top 3 in the turnover game. What they're doing at the moment is miles ahead of anyone else in the competition. And in fact, over the last 10 years, it's the 5th best turnover game that we've seen.
Really?
At this point, of time. So, I just wanted to point out just an individual, if I can, and a lot of credit goes to Nick Blakey, and and we're a huge fan of what he does.
We love him.
Oh, I love him. And everyone loves him, and it's just so exciting when he gets ball in hand. But I think someone that's gone under the radar a little bit this year is Ollie Florent with what he's doing behind the footy. So I don't think it's just lizard or bust in terms of what you have to look for in terms of this ball movement game. In terms of the impact that he's having through his intercepts this year, he's having more impact than any other Swans defender, and that's including Nick Blakey as well. And he does it differently. So the intercept mark is easy to identify. It's a stop play. It's either a contested or uncontested intercept mark, and it's easy to recognise. The hard ones, like the Ed Richards example that we've used for a few weeks, the hard ones to recognise are the intercepts that you win back in congestion at ground level. And there's no better Sydney player at the moment in that aspect of the game than Ollie Florent. So I just wanted to point him out. That's a huge game Friday night. A lot of the attention will go to Nick Blakey. We saw him a couple of weeks ago, Nick Blakey, have a real quiet one in a big game against GWS. It didn't matter because this guy's able to step up. He's able to have the impact. He's a really nice ball user. He's a creative ball user as well. He's not as damaging, with ball in hand as what Nick Blakey does, but he has, a very similar impact and deserves to be recognised for the form that he's in.
Love it, Hoyne. My man, Will Hayward's surely going to get his flowers from you as well. Jared keeps telling me champion data, don't rate him. Well, he's kicked 8 goals in the last week, so I'm just waiting for a bit of love for Will Hayward. But you can hold fire on that because we need the Guess Who clue in about 15 seconds.
Yeah. Who is the number 1 intercept marking ruckman in the competition?
Great question. Who is the number 1 intercept marking ruckman? The question for Guess Who. Who is the number 1 intercepting ruckman for marks? I just would have thought it was Gawn, but it's far too obvious, Hoyne.
Yeah, we don't do the obvious ones here, Kane, do we? We always throw a little bit of left of centre, and it's a good way to actually get this team involved
Let's have a look at some of the guesses, actually. I better get a few of those.
There's a lot that's coming through.
Darcy Cameron.
Yeah.
The big O.
Rowan Marshall's in there.
Marshall gets a bit of love. Goldie gets a bit of love.
Yeah, Todd Goldstein's in
Tim
there.
English.
Tim English. Yeah. There's a fair
Nank
few.
the Tank.
But
Cherry.
The audience is onto it tonight. The number 1 response is the correct response, and that is Darcy Cameron. So Darcy Cameron, and by a long way in terms of how many intercept marks he's taken compared to the next best ruckman in the competition. So I noticed this at the start of the year, and him just pushing behind the ball a little bit more than we've seen previously. I thought, I wonder if that's just a little bit of a thing that they're trying, to start the season and something different. But 9 weeks in, and it's actually sort of maintained 5 intercept marks on the weekend. against West Coast. He's actually had a really good year, Darcy Cameron. 6 of his 9 games. He's had significant impact in those performances. So just hats off to him. So the fact that he's a number one intercept marking ruckman in the competition, but he's also been able to impact the scoreboard more than most ruckmen in the competition this season as well. So he's going along quite nicely, and I just wanted to put him in there because it gets me talking about Collingwood, and the Collingwood faithful think that I hate them, which is not actually correct. But I just wanted to put on the radar, and this might be shot down, but they actually might be better than last year.
Really?
Yeah, and whether or not that means that they win it or not. Time will tell, because there's a team up north in Sydney that are absolutely flying at the moment. But for the first 10 weeks of last year, where they were at their best, they won the flag last year, but they won it by 12 points over a 3-week finals campaign. So hats off to them, but it was tight. The first 10 weeks of the season, that's when they were at their best. So in simple terms, how often they turned a possession into a score, that was the 6th best in the competition in that 10-week period. And how often the opposition did the same thing, they defended that, the 6th best in the competition. So top 6, both sides of the ball, hats off. Not absolutely just flying, but good enough to be a 9-1 team and set your season up. Last 6 weeks, there's no more potent team in the competition at turning possession into a score. And then they are the second hardest team in the competition to turn possession into a score. We did not see that at all in any 6-week period last season.
Really?
And in terms of what they're doing at the moment, over the last 6 weeks, they're 5th offensively. They are the second best team without the footy. Their work at clearance, in particular the last 2 weeks, hats off to the coaching group, come up against Carlton, who that's how they can get you. And then they all reference West Coast and their stoppage work as well. They absolutely annihilated both of them at stoppage, went to work, and that's without Jordan DeGoey and Tom Mitchell in the team. Gets back to it's the how, not the who component that we talk about a lot on this show. And in terms of what they're doing in general play, in winning contests, the 3rd best team in the competition. That profile is better than what we saw from them at any stage last season. They're going to have, the competition, I think, has got better and it is tighter. But that there is better than what they were doing at any 6-week period last year. So I just, we talked about them a couple of weeks ago. They are going under the radar a little bit before that Carlton game. They beat Carlton, then they beat West Coast. They've got these injuries. People are starting to think, are they back? They're well and truly back. But yeah, so I've just put that on the agenda.
I can just see the social media team at SEN HQ. They've just run upstairs to their desk and they've said why Collingwood could be better than last year. That's the headline, and that's your explanation. And it makes sense, Hoyne, but it's frightening for the rest of the competition after they lost their first 3. What about the Giants? Because we've been full of praise after they were undefeated. Spoke to Jack Buckley earlier on in the program. They've identified the issues where they have fallen down. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I heard Jack on the way in, and I'm glad that he mentioned what they were doing defensively at the start of the season, and they knew that they weren't going as well as what their win and loss sort of record suggested. And again, it gets back to the how you're playing, not the who you're playing. The results will eventually take care of themselves. So their defensive profile at the start of the season was mid-table, despite them being 4-0, 5-0, and people sort of thinking that they're going better than what they are. So. What they were doing in the back end of last year, it was, their offense was driven by what they were doing defensively. They were the 3rd best defensive team in the competition for the last 3 or 4 months of the season. Over the last 6 weeks, they're mid-table. They're now mid-table what they're doing offensively. Their clearance game is mid-table, and their contest game in general play is mid-table. So I think the results that are happening at the moment, yes, they are a bit of a surprise to many, but when you have a look at that profile over a 6-week period, and now they are 3 wins and 3 losses in that 6-week period with a profile that is mid-table, it makes sense. So, we've mentioned a lot as well, like the ability to sort of counter-attack across that defensive midfield zone. And I know Kingy's massive on this as well. The ability to be able to counter-attack off that. The Premier has been number 1 in 4 of the last 5 years at being able to score across that, that half-back area. At the moment, over a 6-week period, there is no easier team to score against in that area of the ground than what GWS are. So, and again, I'm glad that I heard Jack Buckley sort of reference that it isn't just the defenders as well, because you have a look at what they're doing at the moment. That's actually okay. I'm putting it more on these small forwards that we've lauded for the back end of last year.
They pride themselves on it.
100%.
Yep.
We lauded it on, and it was there to see. But I'm not sure what you think. But like Toby Bedford hasn't been the same player this year that he was in the back end of last year. Brent Daniels, huge fan of Brent Daniels. He's going okay, but he's not having the same impact that he had on matches last year. Obviously, everyone's spoken about Toby Green and the impact that he's having at the moment. So this small forward area, the ball is bouncing out of that area.
So you reckon they're too tall? I asked Adam Kingsley about this when we had him on breakfast, 3 weeks ago. They essentially play 4 tall forwards. Now, Brown didn't play on the weekend, he's suspended, but Cadman, Hogan, Brown, and there's one other that that's escaping me at the moment. They play Cadman,
Riccardi.
And Riccardi's the one. So they play 4. Are they too tall then, as a result?
I don't think that they are, because they play with the same 4 last year. It was Cadman out and Lockie Keefe in, in that role. So and it worked, and it worked fine. I think that what's happening at the moment is more what's happening at ground level, which wasn't happening last year, and their ability for this mosquito fleet to get to work and pressure the opposition. And I heard that interview. I thought there was a really good interview with him a couple of weeks ago. Like Callum Brown, yes, I get that he's tall. He's powerful. Yeah. He's quick. He has the ability to be able to, to apply pressure as well. So it's an interesting watch at the moment. I'm glad for them that this is happening at round 9 as opposed to round 19. But there's a fair bit there for GWS to work on to get out of being a mid-table team. To start, sort of trying to climb back up the ladder.
Tell me about Adelaide.
Yeah, so we alluded to them at the start of the show, and sort of what they're doing offensively over the last 6 weeks. They are the 4th best team in the competition with the footy, but their profile defensively, has a bit of work to do. So, their ability to defend opposition ball movement is top 3 in the competition, and I just wanted to give the coaching group a bit of a shout out to that. Their ability to shut Brisbane down, switching the footy and going from one side of the ground to the other was there, and it was obvious, and it was a clear plan for them defensively. So they forced Brisbane to turn the footy over 7 times in their D50. Brisbane never do that, never turn the footy over 7. They protect the ball better than almost anyone else in the competition, but they were onto it. They scored 2 goals, 5, potentially could have got a better return as a result of that. But I'm fascinated for this game on Saturday because, you mentioned, before their ability to be able to score off their back half ball movement has been there the last 2 weeks. Close to or more than half of their score has come from back half ball movement against Port Adelaide and Brisbane. And given what we just referenced with Collingwood and how well they're going defensively, and their pressure at the moment is clearly the best pressure team in the competition over the last 6 weeks. Are they going to be able to get through what Collingwood are going to throw up to them? Because if they can't get through, what they actually have to be able to throw back at the opposition isn't quite there at the moment. So, we just, the ability for Isaac Rankin to keep doing what he's doing is so important. I mean, he's shooting the lights out at the moment, but they don't get through that often and as much as what we would probably think. But when they do get past that halfway stage, they're out, they're gone. It's going to get on the scoreboard, which is what we're seeing against Port Adelaide and Brisbane. But the ball has lived more in their back half as a result of not being able to get it out as often as they would like. That's going to be the challenge for me on Saturday, whether or not they can get out and get through what Collingwood are going to dish up to them defensively.
I mentioned last night on Classified about the number of intercept marks they have taken against them. We all remember the Tom Stewart game, but it's been a constant theme. It's happened against Brisbane on the weekend. They took 23, I think it was, for Brisbane. Payne took 8 of them, and happened against Fremantle, Pearce and Ryan, 5 each. Week after week, these interceptors have their way in Adelaide's forward half. Have we seen numbers like this, and have you identified that as being an issue, and how do you solve it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that they tried to solve the Harris Andrews situation on the weekend by Elliot Himmelberg, sort of going to him more often than not. the Jack Payne result would have been a disappointing one for him. Sort of given that he went to their most dangerous key forward in Taylor Walker, and to be able to sort of do that, lock him away, and take 8 intercept marks, that's a bit of a concern. Defensively, I don't think it's through a lack of effort trying to actually nullify it. I just don't think that they've been able to execute. I mean, Pedler goes to Tom Stewart in round 2, potentially, a wrong matchup, but at least they actually tried to actually do something against him. Elliot Himmelberg on the weekend as well. They wouldn't want to be giving that to Collingwood on Saturday, given that Collingwood are the most potent team in the competition, to being able to turn a possession into a score. So a fair bit to watch out for on Saturday afternoon.
Hey, the Port Adelaide win was a shock.
Yeah, it was, and a huge hats off to them. But I think if you were to ever say why are Port Adelaide dangerous, and why why could they potentially get through to a semi-final or even a prelim, that was the pin-up game. They're going to get you. If they're going to get you, they're going to get you at stoppage through through this midfield group that's able to explode and be able to sort of get it on the scoreboard. So they are the 5th best clearance team in the competition. They don't get you through their turnover game, 4th worst turnover game in the competition at the moment. So that's the red flag. That's the concern. That's why I'm not sort of jumping up and down around how they're actually going at the moment. But at least they were true to themselves on Friday night. They took Geelong on at the clearance situation, absolutely annihilated them. And then their ball movement game from kick-ins. I've been fascinated by this all year, the kick-in sort of situation for Port Adelaide. They are clearly the best kick-in team in the competition. And you know what they're going to do. They're going to take corridor. They take corridor more than anyone else in the competition. And everyone knows that that's happening, but they still go for it. That's them. So they are the best kick-in team in the competition. But it comes at a cost, because they give up the second most scores of anyone going back the other way. They play full-on aggression. That's why I find them really easy to watch. I find their games enjoyable to watch. Whether or not that's sustainable or not, I'm not too sure. But in terms of how they can get you, that's how they can get you. And in all due respect to what Geelong did, they were off in the first 40 minutes. If you're off against Port, you're gone. Because they can get it on the scoreboard just about better than anyone else in the competition, and that's why they are dangerous and could be a dangerous threat.
And finally, the Saints.
Yeah, I just want to ask you the question around this. Like, Max King, he probably frustrates a lot of us, and he frustrates a lot of St Kilda supporters. But the first couple of weeks of the season, we saw Max get up the ground, roaming around centre-half forward, then getting back. In the first 2 games of the year, until he got suspended, he had 17 and 15 disposals. We very rarely ever see him have 17 or 15 disposals. In fact, 17 is the second most of his career. He's able to have 19 score involvements in 2 weeks, playing against good oppo in Geelong and Collingwood, I must add. He's had 16 score involvements in the next 4 games. And he hasn't been roaming around the midfield area like he did the first 2 games. When he was roaming around the midfield area, their forward 50 actually functioned quite well. They were scoring 1 in every 2 entries, albeit it's only a 2-game period, but it looked different. He won more than half of his disposals in between the arcs. Since he's come back from suspension and from the knee injury, whether or not he is actually injured and they can't get him to do that same role again, he's won under 40% of his disposals between the arcs. So he's now, staying more closer towards goal. Is that a concern? And are you looking at going, how do we actually get him involved like he was at the start of the year, where it did look very different, from a St Kilda perspective?
100%. Like, even the way that Harry Mackay plays, like, you see him come up and contest that long down the line ball, and he's an excellent contestor mark down the line. We rarely see that from Max. He should be playing that role, and it would get him involved into it. So I think you probably hit on it. I wonder the queries over his body and who would we know? But maybe that's an excuse, maybe it's not. But he's a frustrating player. He's got to come out of himself, and this is a little thing. He's got to show more energy. He looks sad. He plays football sad. Like, compare him to... I'd love to have Brad Johnson have a chat to him. He looks like he enjoys his footy. Even Curnow can have a laugh at it. He just brings big energy
Jeremy
for a
Cameron.
big man. Yeah, like... Even Joe Danaher has he's got big energy. So I just think he's got his shoulders slumped. He looks sad. He never expresses himself. I'd love to see him show a bit more, and that will in turn lift his teammates around him and then his own performance in himself.